Have you ever seen a ghost? Are you a ghost believer or skeptic? Or are you just looking to get into the Halloween spirit? This spooky episode is for you.
Welcome back to the Secret Life of Numbers podcast, the podcast where we dissect everyday numbers and statistics to find the stories behind them.
Each episode, we take a number or statistic and break it down. We will tell you where it comes from and what it means for you. Along the way, hopefully we will inspire you to think about the numbers in your own life.
I'm Levannia, your data scientist on call. I'll be breaking down the numbers.
I'm Lindsay, your data translator. For when Levannia gets too technical on us, I'll be breaking down the rest.
All right, let's jump in.
This is the first episode of our second season.
Yeah, we're back.
We're back.
I was trying to say it in like a spooky way. Like, we're back.
If this is the first time you're listening to us, we're not normally that spooky. But this episode is kind of in honor of Halloween, and we thought it'd be fun to kick off season 2 with an episode that's just fun. So, Levannia, what is our number for this episode?
So today we're talking about how many people believe in ghosts. But before we get into it, I want to ask you if you believe in ghosts.
Sorry to all the believers out there, but I don't believe in ghosts. I think it's fun to see ghosts in movies and things like that.
I am with you. I don't believe in ghosts either, but I still can't watch horror movies. They still scare me. So I don't know if perhaps my conscious mind doesn't believe, but my unconscious might have some underpinnings of belief.
Ooh. I find the ones that are more supernatural, a little bit easier to palate. Ones that really get me are the psychological thrillers where it's a serial killer or something. It's something that could actually happen in real life. I find that one creepier.
Okay. I just avoid the genre altogether because it's just nightmare-inducing on my end.
We're cut from the same cloth in that respect.
All right. So I did a bit of research looking to see how many people believe in ghosts, and I found some numbers. I hesitate to call them studies, but we'll talk about why. Let's go through some of them. In 2017, I found a HuffPost/YouGov poll of 1,000 people suggests about 45% think that ghosts or believe in ghosts.
That's a lot higher than I thought it would be.
So HuffPost YouGov, I'm guessing that means Huffington Post and this market research company called YouGov, surveyed 1,000 Americans. And when I did a little bit of digging to see how many or how ages, things like that, they said 1,000 adult interviews were conducted from December 17th to 18th in 2012. And then they have a margin of error of plus or minus 3.1%.
That's a pretty small margin of error considering.
I can't tell you how they calculated their margin of error either. I wish I had a little bit more information about this particular poll. But I do know the question they asked to come up with their 45%. They asked, do you believe in ghosts or that spirits of dead people can come back in certain places and situations?
Oh. I feel like the way they ask that might not necessarily capture the people that believe in ghosts, but the spirits of the dead, I feel like could capture people that believe in that side and not ghosts explicitly. Maybe they believe that they can feel the presence of a loved one that's passed. I wonder if it's higher because of the way they asked that question. I wonder if they didn't put in or that the spirits of dead people can come back.
If it would be lower?
Yeah.
I guess the question is a bit loaded in a sense, right? I don't know, perhaps.
It'd be a hard question, I think, to flat out deny. Like, oh, I don't believe at all that like spirits of dead people could come back in certain places and situations. That I don't know. It seems like I would probably still answer no, but I could understand people hesitating a bit more.
Yeah. So when they asked this question, of these 1,000 people, 45% said, yes, I do. And then 32% said, no, I don't. And then 23% said, not sure.
Oh, they gave a none of the above option.
They did.
That's interesting because if you add together like the yes, I do and the not sure, it's even bigger because that's 68%.
There's potentially a lot of Americans, at least based on this 1,000 sample, that could believe in ghosts. But we don't know if this population is representative of Americans.
Right. And I wonder, too, how the study was marketed to people to recruit them to do it. Because if you believed in ghosts, you'd probably be a little bit more likely than the other people who don't believe in ghosts to sign up to do a study to talk about whether or not you believe in ghosts.
So that was in 2017. But in 2019, it looks like this market research company, YouGov, ran another poll to like update their numbers a bit.
Of course, follow-up is important.
It is. We want to make sure that we know how many Americans believe in ghosts. So they asked Americans about their belief in various paranormal entities, and it looks like they got similar results. 4 in 10 Americans believe in ghosts, demons, and other supernatural beings.
Wow.
And then some other like interesting results are that more than 1 in 5 say that demons definitely exist, while slightly more believe they probably exist. So they found that 22% say that demons definitely exist, and 24% believe they probably exist.
So we're talking 46% of the population right there.
If the sample is representative of the American population. But yes.
Was this sample also 1,000 people?
It's a little bit more than 1,000, actually. This study was a little bit more extensive than the original poll. They had a methodology section. And in that methodology section, they said that the total unweighted sample size was 1,293 U.S. adults, and that the figures have been weighted and are representative of all U.S. adults age 18 plus. And the interviews were conducted between September 30th and October 1st, 2019.
So how did they weight the results to be representative of the whole population? Do they go into that detail? Or do you have an idea as our resident data scientist?
So they did not go into that much detail, and probably because they're like a market research company, probably like a lot of these algorithms they use are like considered confidential, so they can't like just share them with us because they are making money. But my guess would be, or at least my intuition says, that they probably looked at the demographic distribution of U.S. adults, like what percentage are like 20 to 25, what percentage are 30 to 35, and then they weighted the responses of those individuals based on what weight of the population they are, what percentage of the population they are.
That makes sense. But I guess every time you introduce kind of a new variable that you extrapolate by, you open yourself up to bias, right? Like maybe age isn't the best predictor, or maybe gender is not the best predictor, or biological sex, or kind of whatever they're weighting things by.
Yeah. And like they say weighted, but I'm not sure like what they weighted. Like I gave the example of age, but did they also weight sex?
Or even location, right? Because
yes.
For example, like there's some states in elections that are always, they vote red, and then some are always blue. And
ooh, that brings up fun fact. Republicans are more likely than Democrats to believe in supernatural entities of all kinds.
I don't know whether I'm surprised or not.
Well, actually, this poll goes on to say that more than 1/3 of Americans, so 36%, say that they have personally felt the presence of a spirit or ghost.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have a question. Just circling back to the study we're talking about with, they break down like a few different supernatural beings. Are there some that are more common to believe in and then some that people are like, no, that's definitely not real?
They did look at different supernatural beings. Demons, ghosts, and other supernatural beings were high in people believe in them. So 46% believe in other supernatural beings. Demons, 45% believe in them. Ghosts, 45% believe in them. And then vampires are I guess a lot of people think vampires don't exist because only 13% of people believe in vampires.
Ooh, what a burn to Dracula.
I know. What a burn to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But I guess the question that they asked to get those results is, generally speaking, do you believe that each of the following do or do not exist?
My question with other supernatural beings is what falls into that category? Like, are we talking unicorns, leprechauns? I'm not sure. I guess I'm just not well versed in the range of supernatural beings that are possible, because I see like demons, ghosts, vampires. And I'm like, what are we missing from the list?
Zombies, maybe?
Oh.
But I guess it's kind of like a catch-all category. Like, you don't necessarily believe in these specific ones that we've listed, but do you believe that something could exist?
Oh, right. So maybe that captures our population from the previous study, that the question was asked about spirits of the dead and things like that. Maybe my description of leprechauns and unicorns trivializes that. I didn't read it that way. I genuinely did not know what other supernatural beings we would be talking about. So, Lev, we've had a lot of fun poking fun at the Americans who filled out the survey and kind of where these distributions fall. But we're Canadian, and I think it's only fair if we go through some Canadian numbers. So how do we do on these tests?
So I knew you would ask, and I too was curious. So I did find another market research company that looked at some of these things for Canadians. So I'd say we're pretty similar. 3 in 10, so 30%, according to this market research company called Angus Reid, say people who die with unfinished business can remain on Earth as spirits. And they go on to say that women are much more open to this idea. 29% of women say that this is definitely not true, compared to half of men, 48%.
That's interesting. I think it'd be nice. I'm not thinking necessarily unfinished business, like, oh, you hold a grudge. But I mean, I feel like there's probably a few projects I'll still be working on that would be nice to finish.
Maybe finish some of your knitting or
some of my research, just get that done.
But also, this is fun. So nearly 1 in 3 say it's either definitely or probably possible to communicate with the dead, while 1/3 rule it out entirely.
So the other third is part of the I don't know category.
Yeah. And then once again, women are significantly more open to the possibility of the supernatural. So I guess we're kind of in the minority because we said that we didn't believe in ghosts.
Yeah, we're part of the 29% of women that are like, this is definitely not true.
And I did pull the methodology for this particular survey as well. This was written in the methodology section, and they said that the Angus Reid Institute conducted an online survey from February 22nd to 25th, 2016, among a representative randomized sample of 1,515 Canadian adults who are members of the Angus Reid Forum. So for comparison purposes only, a probability sample of this size would carry a margin of error of plus or minus 2.5 percentage points, 19 times out of 20.
So our 95% confidence interval.
Yeah. And then they go on to say that the survey was self-commissioned and paid for by ARI, the Angus Reid Institute. They weren't paid by another company to do this. They just decided to see how many Canadians believed in the supernatural for fun.
So they self-funded. Interesting.
So it sounds like it's something similar to what YouGov did for Americans, right? They talk about a representative randomized sample of 1,515 Canadian adults. So that sounds a lot like a weighted sample to me.
I think so. But one of the questions that always comes up, we've talked about sampling a lot in our first season, which you can go check out. I think especially our episode about 4 to 5 dentists really goes into sampling.
We did a Cliff Notes version, everything you need to know on the back of a napkin about sampling.
Yes. But what is a representative sample, right? Like, how do you pull? And it says that they were members of the forum. So I think an argument could maybe be made that, like, the members that are part of the Angus Reid Forum might have fundamental differences from the rest of the Canadian population, right? So there'd be a volunteer bias, potentially.
Mm-hmm. Funny you should ask, because on their website, in the About section, they talk about what the Angus Reid Forum is. And I can read the definition to you.
Ooh, please do.
Yes. The Angus Reid Forum is an online community of adults living in Canada who have been provided with a forum to voice their opinions. Members answer questions by completing short, easy, and interesting surveys on a variety of topics and issues. Who manages the forum? It says here, the community and this site is managed by Angus Reid Forum Incorporated.
Interesting. It tells us something without telling us anything about the people that are on this site.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, it's really quite vague. I mean, it's unclear whether or not these two paid their participants, but that is a practice that many market research companies use. They do pay their participants that conduct these surveys or that fill out these surveys.
That's very true. And you have to be really careful about that when you're doing studies, because depending on the amount, or even if it's not necessarily like straight cash or a gift card, if it's like an item, you have to really think carefully about whether or not that'll change or affect whether or not people want to participate in a study. So, like, this is something in my research methods course that I did in medical school. Like, there was a whole bit about that, about, how do you pick an amount? How do you pick an item?
Yeah, because you don't want to create undue bias in your population based on, like, those individuals who are more likely to participate in a paid study. Like, maybe they have a different idea about ghosts.
Yeah, that's very true. You just don't know. And I think this is an interesting place to take a small break before we come back and talk about what really are market research companies.
Yeah. So welcome back, everyone. So before the break, we talked about how many Canadians and Americans believe in ghosts. And we talked a little bit about the types of companies that are typically market research companies that kind of conduct these polls to give us that information. So now Lindsay is going to give us a little bit more information about these market research companies.
Yes. So, with a very formal definition from Wikipedia.
A very accessible definition.
So, market research is an organized effort to gather information about target markets and customers. So, a lot of it, as we've discussed in the studies numbers that we've talked about, is a lot of it's conducted via surveys and self-reporting. And this is really important to take note of because there's a few fallacies or pitfalls that are associated with self-reporting, with surveys. So let's go through some of the biases that market research is subject to. And it helps give you a bit of a lens to look at a market research study and the numbers that are come out of it.
I'm so excited.
So our first bias is a well-known bias, and it's volunteer bias. I actually found a really cool site that's called the Catalog of Bias. And yeah, they just have a lot of different biases cataloged, and they have great definitions and examples and things. So I'm going to read the definition right from there. So participants volunteering to take part in a study intrinsically have different characteristics from the general population of interest. It means there's kind of a fundamental difference between the group of people who are like, yes, I would like to fill out this survey about ghosts, and those who don't.
Yeah, because in a sense, this is convenience sampling, right? Like,
oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's who you have available, which it is hard to recruit people to a study. So fair enough, but it has to be acknowledged and accounted for.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to put on our Canadian census whether or not you believe in ghosts.
You know what would be fun with the census is if every year they had or every year that they do the census, they have a throwaway question that's something really random, like, do you believe in ghosts? Just a fun kind of Stats Canada tidbit to give us.
Yeah, just something for the gram.
Yeah. So another bias that could be quite prevalent in market research is recall bias. So again, from the catalog of bias, it is defined as a systematic error that occurs when participants do not remember previous events or experiences accurately or omit details. The accuracy and volume of memories may be influenced by subsequent events and experiences. A good example of this is when you go fishing and you catch a fish. The first time you tell the story, the fish was maybe 12, 15 inches long. And then as the years go on, suddenly it's like a shark that you single-handedly caught.
Bigger.
And next thing you know, the rod snapped in half, you grabbed it out of the water with your hand.
Yeah, you wrestled it, and yeah.
Our memories aren't perfect. So whenever you're asking someone to remember, was there a time where you think you had an encounter with a ghost? People might be inclined to be like, well, maybe I can't think of it now, but I'm sure there was a time, or oh, yes,
Yeah, or maybe they could be like, oh, there was that one time in the laundry room where I got really scared. And then as they recall that over and over, they're like, oh, I definitely felt a presence in the laundry room. Oh, it was definitely very scary. It was definitely a presence. I saw a shadow.
Yeah, exactly. So this is something that could be at play, especially in our ghost surveys.
That is a true example. I definitely was a little scared in the laundry room once.
So one of the things that I was wondering, though, is what inclines people to believe in ghosts or supernatural beings? And is there something more to this? Is there something beyond cognitive biases? What cognitive biases are at play?
Yeah. I mean, it does sound like there is something, right? Because they've YouGov repeated the analysis twice, it seems, and then Canadians also have similar results. So even though we can't be certain if those populations are representative of all Americans or all Canadians, it does indicate that there's something there.
Definitely. And I think, too, if you look back through time, if you look back through folklore or kind of oral histories of things, there's lots of different examples of things that are supernatural. So I found an article from Discover magazine, which goes into why your brain wants to believe in ghosts and the supernatural. Apparently, according to this article, in Britain, people are more likely to believe in ghosts than a divine creator.
Oh, wow. So more people believe in ghosts than God in the UK?
Apparently, according to market research.
Okay.
I was a little surprised by that one. I don't know if I buy it.
Yeah, we'd have to see the original sample and see how they weighted and randomized and if they collected enough data.
Yeah, who did they ask, right? Maybe they were phoning people on Sunday mornings.
Oh, yes.
When everyone's at church. So that one remains to be substantiated. But the article talked to Christopher French, who is a psychologist at the Anomalistic, so ANOMALISTIC, Psychology Research Unit at London's Goldsmiths University. And his area of expertise and what he studies is paranormal experiences, and he looks for the non-paranormal explanations for those events.
Okay.
One of the things that the article talks about is, have you heard of that book, Thinking Fast and Slow?
Yes. I haven't read it, though, but I have. It's got like a pencil on the cover.
Yes. Okay, so that book's written by Daniel Kahneman, but his theory is that we have two ways of thinking, right? So we can think fast and we can think slow. And the fast way of thinking is very reactionary, and it serves us quite well from like an evolutionary standpoint. So if you're out at night and you hear a bump in the woods, the part of your brain that thinks fast is going to be like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah, like danger.
Yeah, and that has served us well, right? Because maybe then we wouldn't be caught by a predator or something. And then the other way is our slow way of thinking. So a good example of that is what we're doing with this podcast, right? Like we're slowly considering, you know, the different biases, the evidence, weighing it against other things and thinking critically about it. It kind of comes back to cognitive biases that help us when we're thinking quickly.
Okay.
Some of the cognitive biases that might be at play with having us believe in ghosts and supernatural beings, there's 3 here. So one is patternicity, which all of the definitions I'm giving are going to be direct quotes from the article, which is the tendency to see false connections in unrelated, meaningless data.
Okay.
So our brain's kind of hardwired to see patterns, right?
So we'll look for patterns even if none exist.
Exactly. Which makes sense, too. It helps us make sense of the chaos that is all around us. The next one, I'm afraid I'll butcher the pronunciation. I did look up how to pronounce this. So, pareidolia, which is the tendency to see recognizable patterns or objects in things. So, for example, seeing a face in clouds or like in a chocolate chip cookie or something.
Or seeing a face in the shadows in the laundry room.
Exactly. So we essentially make up shapes and pictures from randomness. So we might see something that is actually nothing, but then our brain makes sense of it by forming this recognizable image.
Yeah.
The third one is intentionality bias. This is defined as an implicit bias where all actions are judged to be intentional by default. It kind of comes back to like, you know, when people say, oh, everything happens for a reason. There's a sense that, no, it can't just be random or it can't just be something that happens.
You just didn't randomly get spooked in the laundry room, Levannia. There was maybe a ghost in there with you.
Yes. And one of the things that I really like, though, is in this article, it goes over the biases and kind of talks about the different ways we process things. But it ends off with kind of a bigger picture look at it. And it proposes that maybe ghosts are a way that we reckon with our own mortality. It might provide some hope to us who have lost loved ones that they're still there and that one day, you know, when we die, the death isn't final, that we won't be gone for good. So to kind of end off, I'll take away a little story that I learned about
a ghost story.
Yes. So apparently, Winston Churchill ran into the ghost of Abraham Lincoln when he was having a bath at the White House after World War II.
Okay. What did Abraham Lincoln say to Winston Churchill?
Oh, that's a good question. I wonder if there was dialogue.
Okay. All we know is that he encountered Abraham Lincoln, not what they discussed.
Yeah, that's private.
Okay. Yeah. Between our leaders.
Yeah. But this article kind of goes into the fact that, like, sometimes the ghosts we think we see could be optical illusions. So our brains fill in the gaps of things that are missing.
Back to those patterns, for example, that you want to see.
Yeah, and a good example is, you know, those pictures that circulate every so often, like there was the dress that like people were like, no, it's white and gold. And other people were like, no, it's black and blue. And it's just because of the way that your brain fills in the missing information. The same could be at play with ghosts. Our reasons for believing in ghosts might not be that different than why we believe in anything. It can help us answer the question why. And when there's chaos around us, it helps give our brain some sort of order or explanation for different things that happen.
I see. And like that order and explanation can like reduce anxiety, for example.
Yeah, exactly. The kind of way they phrase it in the article is that it can shield us from the harsh truths of the world.
Okay.
So, Lev, I have a final question for you.
I'm almost afraid to ask.
Did your opinion of whether or not you believe in ghosts change from doing the research for this episode?
That is a good question. You know, I think it's back to that phrasing, right? Like if you use the word ghost, I don't think I believe in ghosts per se, but like other supernatural beings, like I'm not quite sold that they may not exist. I don't know. I think I too want to believe that comfort that like if someone close to me passes away, there's like still a way that I can talk to them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of comfort in that. And I think everyone at some point has probably thought that, or like felt really, that something was a sign or, a message from a loved one that they're doing okay and that they love you or that they miss you or.
Yeah. I mean, like the scientist in me is like, ghosts do not exist, Levannia. Like the supernatural, like that's just ridiculousness. But I don't know, I suppose maybe if I separate that the scientist, I'm like, I think I want to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's exactly what the articles are talking about is maybe we should believe in ghosts.
So I guess while we're trick-or-treating, we can ponder whether or not we believe in ghosts or whether or not we should.
Yes. Listeners, let us know. Do you believe in ghosts? Are you part of the 45%?
So, Lindsay, do you know what time it is?
The best time?
Yeah, it's time for our science seed. And this is our first one of season 2.
Exciting.
So each episode, we like to give our listeners something to think about. A science nugget to help you think more critically about the numbers, statistics, and really the science you hear every day. So Lindsay, do you want to take it away with our little science nugget for the day?
Well, our nugget for today is to really think critically about where you're getting your information. As we've seen with market research studies that we've discussed in this episode, is it's pretty easy to throw out a stat based on a small sample size or a sample that's supposedly representative of a larger population, and to make it quite believable and seem quite credible.
Yeah.
And market research definitely has its time and its place and is a legitimate thing.
Yeah, I mean, it can be useful, for example, like if you're trying to figure out like how to market your product to a certain population, right? Like sometimes companies will request studies to see like, will this do well with like 20 to 25 year olds or like 30 to 35? Like who should we target? Those sorts of things.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But I think the important thing to take away is that while there's that time and place for market research that is done that should be informing policy decisions or healthcare decisions or really kind of these things with larger repercussions, potentially.
Like larger impact decisions or I guess further reaching.
Yeah, we should be using studies that are as well designed, as free from bias, or as much as possible the bias is mitigated. Mm-hmm. Those are the studies that we should be using to inform those important decisions.
Even if you can't eliminate a bias, the thing that kind of separates the market research sometimes from scientific research in many cases is you outline your biases and you enumerate them. You say exactly what you introduced or what you think you may have introduced and discuss how that can affect your results.
Yeah, and you take it into account. So, yeah, don't believe every stat you hear.
Yes. Think critically about the numbers that you hear every day. Thanks for listening to the first episode of Season 2, everybody. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts. You can find the references we use for this episode in our show notes. A special thank you to Julian Bertino, who does our sound editing and music.
Have an idea of what number we should cover next? Want to learn more about what we've talked about today? Follow us on Instagram at The Secret Life of Numbers.
We'll catch you next time on The Secret Life of Numbers, where the numbers can run,
but they can't hide.